Well, hi guys, with the gift of gab from the City of Truth, talent on loan from God, talking about Venezuela today. And is there life after Maduro? Let's examine how U.S. policy is preventing democracy in Venezuela and perverting a possible peaceful transition to a more normal kind of leadership. The pull-out method fails again. U.S. policy is actually incentivizing Maduro and those that rule with him to hold on tighter than ever before to their power. U.S. policy is preventing fair elections. Let's look at what transpired after a young and very naive political upstart named Juan Guaido declared himself president last year. And he said that he wasn't controlled by the U.S., but there was a Russian journalist, independent Russian journalist, that taped him in a conversation saying, "Oh yeah, I can I can give the okay for the Swiss bank accounts of the Venezuelan leadership to be frozen, but I got to check with Washington first." And then the same journalist called Washington to ask if it was okay. He was actually pretending to be the president of Switzerland, and this proved, even though it was kind of a prank, these taped conversations, it proved that Juan Guaido was actually taking orders from Washington, D.C. It's gangster light. It's kind of like Pinochet, where you say, okay, so times are so bad, so anything goes, including lies. Current Venezuelan government, during that time, there was all this furor on CNN and constant programming about a transition. They got a clear indication of the sort of reaction that would come to a lessening of their grip. You even had government spokespeople calling for the death of Nicolas Maduro and calling for him and the whole Bolivarian leadership to be arrested for cocaine trafficking. There's no evidence that the government of Maduro has been involved in narco trafficking. It's a situation where the pot's calling the kettle black because of the U.S. government's role in narco trafficking. So this is what the government of Venezuela would have to expect after a month of programming on CNN and these other news channels, calling for even a violent overthrow. And when you think about it, now would be a logical time for a president who lived through a crisis that made him extremely unpopular to give up and pass the buck. In fact, the whole Bolivarian revolutionary cabinet probably at this point just assumed to go home because of the hyperinflation and the economic problems, but not when they face certain jail and certain exile. Remember, in ancient times, exile was considered even worse than jail because you had to go away from your home. And this is what the U.S. government has been calling for on CNN, if you listen to the commentary. This prevents them from demonstrating repentance, even while the pitfalls of socialism are laid bare for the world to see. So with the rise of Juan Guaido, before the fall of Juan Guaido, CNN broadcast nearly all day for a month, lie after lie after lie about Venezuela, was constantly calling for Maduro and everyone around him to be arrested. It's like U.S. policy towards Cuba after the revolution there. They cut all the phone cables between Florida and Cuba. You even have whole warehouses of phone books from the time that suddenly were never used. Rather than trying to be an example of capitalism, when by force of example, a violent approach is adopted. And what would really Venezuela have to expect? One of those lies where the people said, oh, things are so bad, so nothing could get worse. It's impossible for anything to get worse because things are already as worse as they're going to go. And this seemed to be able to justify lying. And so when there was an aid truck with goods coming from Colombia to Venezuela, it was set up on fire. I knew this was violence by the Venezuelan opposition pretty much right off the bat because I'm in touch with alternative media and I saw the videos of them throwing Molotov cocktails. But it was reported throughout the press of the entire world that Maduro had lit the truck on flames. in reality, there's a lot of countries that would like to help, but the U.S. has a blockade around Venezuela, so the countries that would like to help can't get in there. A month or so later, there was a mea culpa in the New York Times where they said, no, it wasn't the Venezuelan government. But by that time, the damage had already been done. And it was refreshing beyond words to have Venezuela's foreign minister at the time come out publicly and say, well, this is a false flag attack. Just like it was refreshing beyond words when Hugo Chavez was one of the only world leaders who had the cojones to call September 11th a false flag attack. And this helps to get the concept of false flag into the political science lexicon and helps it become more of a concept that we think with socially. But you had U.S. Congress people and others calling for the death of Maduro on the basis of something that was a lie. And there's no evidence that Venezuelan government had set the truck on fire. So what would it look like if Maduro decided, okay, we'll just have an election and let somebody else inherit these problems? There's the process of what in Iraq was called de-Baathification, which is really a pretext for extreme privatization. And it was year zero of the free market fantasies. This is what the economic advisors that work around Washington at the Chicago school and all that, that's what they're into, is this shock doctrine where things get so bad that you can literally start over. And the CIA was also very adept at doing this with people. So they would try to regress them through trauma and keep them hooked up to electric shocks for days and weeks, even developed methods of self-crucifixion, where the idea was that things would get so bad that you would forget everything and you would be a blank slate. But they found that the people went crazy. Some of them even turned into like zombie assassins. This is, the whole experiments with MK Ultra that were coming out of the church committees. So maybe Venezuela, in their year zero of the free market fantasies, maybe they could have forced GMOs, like in Iraq, when Paul Bremer, who's up to his neck in narco trafficking, wrote the Iraqi constitution and mandated that these farmers who had traditions of thousands of years of seeds put them aside in favor of monoculture and GMO crops. You could also expect lavish contracts to American companies. Millions dead and no more alternative media. Just like in Iraq, they had to get rid of programming like Al Jazeera. Now, Telesur is run by the Venezuelan government, but I think without the grain of socialism, if you watch that channel, you're forced to admit that they really have some first-rate programming and really alternative and independent voices. Every time the U.S. sticks its nose in the affairs of other countries, all hell breaks loose. Massive loans from the IMF and the World Bank, following the prescription of economic hitmen, impose poverty for decades to come and give foreign control over local political decisions, taking it out of the hands of the people and putting it into the hands of corporations. So is there life after Maduro? Maybe, but not when Maduro's own life is at stake.